Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole with another video. Someone asked me the other day when I put a video up of this Jolly Star, why is it that some grinders have 2.5 degree offset as with this grinder and some grinders don't. So if we zoom in and actually have a look at this grinder, you'll notice right down the bottom that you'll see 3 notches, you'll see 0 degrees in the middle, and you'll see down 10 on either side, offset of 2.5 degrees. It's because that this is a tiltable vise, not a slide-in vise. And when you tilt the vise, it offsets and it throws out the geometry by 2.5 degrees. It does not happen on a slidable vise, but on a tiltable vise it does. So therefore you'll find in the range of Tacoma and Oregon that have slidable vices that you won't find a 2.5 degree offset. Because you tilt the vise, it causes an offset. You achieve the same result using a vise that moves away from the teeth and a tiltable vise that moves away but in a different way. It tilts rather than move out horizontal. It's more like when you tilt it, it's more like a 45 degree angle. So in other words, on this type of vise, it tilts like that on an angle, whereas a slidable vise will go out. So that's the difference, okay? Now, you don't see it on many grinders, but you do see it on this grinder, and if we zoom in, you'll notice that it's got 10 down and 0 angle on here, which is the top plate. Now, when we did a video of the Stihl USG grinder, we turned around and said that, why is it that when the head sits horizontal, that it's out by 3 degrees? Well, when you do 10 degrees downward tilt, you've got 2 different angles. You've got your standard angle, and when you do 10 degrees downward tilt, you add 2.5 degrees. Now, if that was built in permanently, then you'd be 2.5 degrees off 0. And if you actually look, there's 2.5 degrees, but if we come back and look at the head, it's on an angle. It's not sitting dead straight. So Stihl on the USG grinder permanently give you 10 degree down angle, whether you've got semi-chisel or full chisel. So you could do the same on this grinder. All as you'd have to do is move the scale, the template scale on the back, you'd move it to the left-hand side by 2.5 degrees, and essentially you would have 10 degrees downward tilt all the time. Normally, on this type of grinder, if you actually have a look on the back of the scale, you'll notice that 90 degrees is perpendicular to the actual guide rail bar, the bar that's here. So by having it offset by 2.5 degrees means that you're going to compensate. And what that actually means, that if you use a combination of the top plate cutting angle and the top plate, that if you set something at 30 degrees, you'll end up with 30 degrees. And what I mean by that is, if you set this at 60 degrees by using the offset, and you set this at 30 degrees by using the offset, you'll get exactly that. Because any time that you change something on these grinders, using 10 degrees downward tilt, it's going to affect the geometry. This is a more upmarket type grinder. There are cheaper ones, and the cheaper ones do not compensate for it. The Stihl USG grinder does compensate for it. It's built into the grinder permanently. And what I'm demonstrating here, that if you was to do the same thing on this type of grinder, build it in permanently, then you would have an offset of 2.5 degrees like that, and the motor would be sitting down but it wouldn't say 2.5 degrees. It would say 0 degrees. So that's what they've done on a actual this type of Jolly Star grinder. They've given you the option to use 0 degrees, and they're giving you the option to use standard top plate settings without any offset. So when you use 10 degrees downward tilt, it's up to you whether the manufacturer recommend 10 degrees downward tilt. It's also, the geometry is on the actual top plate angle. When you hold a file and you file a full chisel chain with 10 degrees downward tilt, it also changes the geometry, and we can demonstrate that. So holding a tooth, just see if we can refocus on this. If we actually hold the tooth like this, so that you can see that really clear, if we drop the file down 10 degrees, you notice the file no longer comes in contact with the back of the tooth until we start to file a little bit of the front off. And that means if we file the front off, we're going to change the top plate angle. Hence why you got the 2.5 degrees, right? So by using 10 degrees downward tilt, it does change things. I hope that explanation helps. The more you actually get involved into angles, the more that you find out. And we can actually have a look at the offset of the head of 2.5 degrees, like the still, that if you set it up permanently like that, you'll find out that the wheel doesn't line up perpendicular to the actual guide rails of the chain. And if you have a close look, you can see that there's a little gap on the ruler, so that's your 2.5 degrees offset, right? Now, with all this attention to detail, how much difference is it going to make? It'll only make a small difference if you use it or you don't use it. So I'm only talking a small percentage. It could be maximum of 5%. So the thing is, are you better off using the right angles to get a better performance of 5%? Well, probably the answer to me that it's going to take no effort to set it up, then the answer is yes, you're better off using it. So the Jolly Star incorporates the offset on the top plate cutting angle, offset of 2.5 degrees, and on the top plate it incorporates 2.5 degrees offset, because a tiltable vise does change the geometry much more than a slidable vise that moves out. You don't change the geometry as much. This is probably one of the reasons that they went to a vise that moves outwards. Also, the other thing that changes the geometry slightly, only slightly, by a small amount, is that when the wheel wears down, it'll tend to grind one side a little bit more than the other side, because the angle is a little bit different, unless you can compensate for that. And the slidable vise is one way that you can compensate for that. These type of vices don't compensate for that. I brought this particular grinder because I really love the way that the handle works, the way that it closes. It's a self-centering vise, so both sides move in and out together. Anyway, I hope that information helps about 10 degrees downward tilt and the 2.5 degrees offset on the top plate cutting angle and the 2.5 degrees offset on the top plate angle. Not many grinders are fitted with that. This grinder is. Hopefully I've explained the reasons as to why this is set up like that. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.